what makes a good comms director? So there's three big ideas. Actually, we have a few more than these, but let's start off with these three big ideas. If you're going to be a communications director in a church, there's a certain mindset that you need to have. It's I was explaining this to one of our directors here at the church. So I'm a director. He's another director. He's in charge of like the care of like people, pastoral care, those type of things. So I was trying to explain to him the difference between what he does and a communications department. And I was like, hey, if you see somebody walking down the hallway and they drop something, I think your first response would be to go over there and pick it up and help him. And I was like, well, my first response might be to say, hey, can you go help him? And then I take my phone out and I take a picture of it. So there's a different mindset that kind of comes with church communications. We aren't necessarily the ones that's doing the ministry. We're actually the people that are capturing the ministry. And then our ministry is to make that blow up, like to help as many people as possible see that. So you have to be creative. You have to think about things from a creative angle. So you have to be a student of design and marketing and even like business. I think business mindset even helps you quite a bit with this. But you need to have a bent towards how do we do this from a different perspective, and then be able to think around something in 360 degrees and say, hey, what if we did it like this? And then so Dennis, I know you've been doing this for quite some time. Any thought of on this, like what does this look like from a creative perspective?
I think the key thing to note here, as we talk about what makes a good comms director, I can recognize that a lot of people that are probably listening to this right now, they're probably saying, oh, well, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that, right? And that's okay, right? It's not where you start, but it's really where you finish. And these pillars that we talk about, being creative, being detailed, being a leader, these are all things that can be developed, right? I don't believe a good comms director was just born, but I really believe a good comms director is made, right? So for me, I am a creative, right? But I wasn't always a creative. But what happened is kind of like what it says is like I became a student of design and marketing. So although I might not have all of the Photoshop skills or the Adobe Illustrator skills like Michael does, I have a really good eye. And over time, I've gained an eye that now I'm able to do design at a high level. And not because I went to school and I got the technical skills, but it's because I paid close attention to see what would work for our ministry. And over time, I just developed a really good eye. And then the second thought being detailed, right? In my leadership skills, I'm not a naturally detailed person. I'm very high level vision. This is where we're going. But I've also learned that there are certain things that I just need to pay attention to, right? So I would say the main thing I would say as it relates to what makes a good comms director, it's understanding these different pillars, but it's also understanding that you don't need to be there right now. It's more about going on the journey to get there.
Yeah, and I think you just have to have a hunger for when it comes to creative. I love the idea that the creativity is it's earned. Like you develop into that. Like you aren't naturally just amazing at being creative. So a lot of the techniques that I've used is that I like to read books from other creatives, and it just helps me to understand how they think about the world and how they came up with ideas and those type of things. I like to look at YouTube videos. One of the things I enjoy doing is finding videos on how to do a new technique, maybe in graphic design, or maybe there's a new tool that's been developed, and I like to learn about that. Or photography. I like to look at experts that are doing a really good job at photography, and they show tips and tricks on how to do things. And so I think that's one of the things. You have to have a bent towards like learning. Like, how do I just have a appetite for becoming better in different areas? I can't tell you how many courses I have either taken that are free or that I have purchased just to get better at a skill.
Right.
I'm not a great writer, just naturally, but I've taken several courses that give me formulas. And if I learn the formulas, then I become a better writer. So you just have to have an appetite towards that. Be a student, be able to learn. And I think with the detail thing, you touched on it, but you just have to be able to manage. Like that's the way I look at it. I started in as a communications director, and my thought initially was, well, I'm going to be able to be very creative and do things that are fun and creative and do the things I enjoy doing. What I found out is that managing things, managing resources, managing people is a huge part of the job. Like, how do I steward well what God has given to me? How do I meet deadlines? How do I serve people really well, not just by doing the project, but helping them to think about the project from a communications or a marketing perspective? We're in ministry, right? Like, and there's a ministry mindset where we're trying to care and take a look at people's hearts and care for that really well. That's kind of the ministry side of it. But there's a communication side of it it's different. It's a different perspective on thing. And we by planning and being strategic and having great management, we actually are able to care for people, through that. And then the other part of it is a leader. So the third pillar that we're talking about here is being able to present ideas and capture vision. So that's one of the things that I had to learn how to do as well when I was younger. Is like, how do I listen to somebody's vision? You've probably been in the situation where, your communications, you're designing, that's your job, that's what you're supposed to do. Somebody comes along from the youth department, they're like, man, here's our event, here's what we're thinking, here's what we want to happen. And then it's your job then to make that event promotion really well, so people come to the event and actually want to be a part of it. Well, you have to be able to listen to those ideas, listen to that vision, and then be able to now come back and present your solution to that, your designs and your whatever web platform or ads you put together. You have to be able to present that really well. So leadership is a really big part of this. Being a comms director means you have to level up in your leadership. So like John Maxwell books and like all the things you can consume. He's probably written over 100 books, right, at this point.
That's
But
right.
that's going to be very, very helpful in helping you be successful as a comms director.
That's good. Yeah. And I think it's the same idea with leadership. It's this idea that, again, a great leader isn't born, but a great leader is made, right? So again, just to recap this thought, is that, again, if you're not here yet, that's why the Com Academy, that's why we created it, right? It's to develop you in your creativity, to develop your management skills, but overall to develop your leadership skills.
So we're going to walk you through this journey as your guides to help you to be able to become a better leader. Like this is not a leadership course, but we want to help you become a better leader, because ultimately that's what helps you become a better communications director. So those are the first three pillars. There's a few more that we want to make sure that we unpack for you as well. So those are the first three. The next three are consistency, continuity, and context. Okay, these are all one word ideas, but we're going to unpack for you what these mean. So, Dennis, why don't you start with consistency?
So the idea of consistency, and the thing I love about these pillars is this also relates to any form of communication, right? So the title of this, what makes a good comms director. But the best thing about this is you can follow these same principles for social media. You can follow these same principles for design, right? So the first one is consistency, right? You need to be consistent. Now, here's what I mean by that. What makes a good comms director is you also have to understand that you have leadership that you have to report to, essentially. Now, if you are not consistent, right, you are going to face a lot of issues as you go along, right? So this whole idea, again, there's multiple facets to this. It's one in your leadership capacity, but it's also in your creative capacity. Design, right? If you're looking at, let's say you're creating a design, for example, if there's no form of consistency within that design, so that means you have 100 different fonts, you have 30 million different colors, that's not going to be a good design, right? Let's jump back to this idea of leadership, right? If you have, let's say, a team under you, if that team, if you're inconsistent and they don't know what to expect from you, then you're actually the thing that's stopping the machine from rolling, right? So the reason why we talk about consistency is because consistency is what helps things flow. Again, both in your leadership capacity and in your creative capacity.
Yeah, consistency is a really big key in building trust. Like when people see something online and then they come and they see something in person that's in print and it's consistent, like there's a level of trust that's earned with that. I think the other part of consistency is that like Dennis was saying, from a leadership perspective, if you as a communications person are being very, very consistent with your lead pastor, with maybe the directors in different parts of the church, and you're just saying, hey, here's what I need every single time. Like, and if you give me that every single time, then man, I will do a great job for you. That's one of the things that I had to establish in one of my roles as communications director. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but you might get a promotion request from the ministry, the women's ministry, that's like, hey, we want to promote this. And then you don't have what you need. Like, you don't have the time. You don't have like, hey, what is the call to action? Like, what are people supposed to do? Once they read this, like, what do you want them to do? Or simply like, who's the contact for this, or anything like that. So if you can create a form, that's what I ended up doing. Like, hey, I created a form, and then I just said, hey, anytime you want to request something from the creative department, from the communications department, just fill out this form. And then that way I have what I need. And then they can know that I'm going to take care of them. Like, it's consistent every single time. So, and then I teach them, like, actually had this was a larger team, a larger church, but I would actually get people together on the staff and say, hey, can I just do a little workshop? Like, here's what I need from you. Here's why I need it. And then if you can give me that, I promise I'm going to help you really, our team is going to help you really, really well. So for example, helping them understand what is a call to action and why is that important. And through Calm Academy, we're going to tell you about that. Basically, it's like, hey, what's the one thing you want somebody to do when they see your promotion? Like, is it click the link to register? Is it show up at 8 a.m. on Wednesday night or Wednesday morning? Whatever that looks like. So I had to educate. And so consistency is a big part of that, I think, is educating people and then being consistent in how you lead. But then also in communicate, when you actually promote something, it needs to have a consistent feel online and then also in person. So as people
That's right.
encounter that communication, there's a trust that's being built where they're saying, okay, I think I trust you enough to take a next step and to click that button to register or to show up at that event.
Yeah, that's so good. And then the next thing that we jump into is this idea of continuity, right? And again, I'm going to keep saying it. These same principles that make up a good comms director, it's the same idea as it relates to design, right? Continuity, meaning like is it the same in different places, right? In design, like something could be in a different format, it can be in a different medium, but do I know that this is coming from the same place, right? And I think, Michael, you touched on it a little bit, right? uh, the consistency and the continuity, both of these things help develop this thing called trust, right? And what people want to know most of all is they want to know, can I trust you, right? And if I can trust you, that's when I can bring you all of my junk, right? That's when I can open that's when I can become vulnerable, right? That's when I can open up, right? That's when I can get a little bit uncomfortable, right? And just to tie back a little bit, like that's why a good communication director is so important, because a good communication director is always looking at these filters, like, is this consistent with who we are or the messaging we put out? Is there continuity? Is there continuity in language? Are we switching? Are we calling it serve team one week and then we're calling it volunteers the next week and then we're calling it dream team? Like, is there continuity in what we're saying and how we're showing up and how we're speaking, right? All of those things are very important.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we do with Church Brand Guide. Is that one of the first things we do is like, hey, let's just get on the same page. Like,
That's
you
right.
have ministries, you have a worship service, you have small groups, you have serve teams. What do you call it? And then we document that. Let's just make sure we call it the same thing every single time. So there's a tool called a brand guide. It's basically a book that you just write down everything so that you use it the same way every single time. In that brand guide, you might write down, these are the color values for our brand. Maybe there's 5 colors and these are the color values. So you put down the hex code, the RGB code, the CMYK code, even the Pantone number, so that across all different media, it's the same.
Right.
So a brand guide is a great tool to help you with this continuity, to make sure that you're looking good on all different types of media. Your logo should be, consistent. Like there might be 2 or 3, maybe 4 variations of the logo. But man, you should lock it down. Like it shouldn't be stretched and maybe a different color and all this stuff. Like it needs to be consistent across all different types of media. And then every time you see it, it's consistent. And that's what builds up brand recognition. I don't know if you've ever seen like a car around town with the sticker of like a church logo on it. And then like you're like, oh, that's they go to my church. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but because there's a simple mark that's consistent, you recognize it, and that makes an impression in our minds, and it builds trust. So the reason why this is important, it builds trust to where at some point somebody's going to see that and they're going to be like, you know what, I need to just go and check it out. So continuity really helps you to help people to come and take those next steps with you.
And then the next level of that is something called context. And again, all of these words that we have on the screen can go in so many different directions. But what we're trying to teach you is we're trying to teach you principles that you can apply in multiple different places. So context, as it relates to being a communication director, the first thing is, are you in the know, right? For example, at the time of this recording, Instagram recently put out a new platform called Threads, right? Have you heard it? Like, ask yourself this question, like, have you heard about it? Do you know about it, right? Do you have context into what it is, right? And then context also in the realm of understanding who you're speaking to, right? Or who you're communicating. What season of life are they in? All of these things play a role in how you communicate and if you can communicate effectively.
Yeah, a target audience is a really good way to do this well. So whenever you're promoting or communicating an idea, an event, anything that's going on in your church, always think about it from the perspective, like, who is the ideal person that needs this message? And then craft your message around communicating to that person. In marketing world, it's called an avatar. So one of the things we do with church brands is we create an avatar. Like, what is one person that would love our church? Like, to where it's built for them. Now everybody's welcome, and it's built for, anybody that wants to come. But the more focused we are, the more attractive we become. So think about it. Who is that person that you can communicate to that allows your communication to be laser focused? Because that's what becomes attractive. And even as you're communicating maybe different events within the church, always think about who is the person that this event is tailor-made for, and then communicate it in a way that reaches out to them. And then again, it sounds counterintuitive, but when you're focused, you actually attract everybody, like more people. But if you're trying to communicate to everybody, and again, this is in church world, I see this mistake a lot. Like, we're trying to communicate to everybody. And when we communicate to everybody, we communicate to nobody. That's not the right English, but that's hopefully that sticks. But yeah, you need to make sure that you're focused in your communication, and context helps you to stay focused so that you really do cut through the noise to reach the people that really need what you have.
So as it relates to being a communications director, ask yourself, am I consistent, right? Is there continuity in what I'm doing? Do I have the correct context? When you're training up your team, when you're training up a volunteer person, ask yourself, how can I be consistent with them? How can I show them continuity? How can I get them to understand the context, right? So these are principles that you can apply in many different areas to help you become a good communications director.